Hey, what's up, everybody? Alf here with another episode of our Learning PvP series. I'm joined by my friend and colleague Hoff, who is putting all this together, doing a lot of the hard work. I'm just here to be a pretty face and to provide insight and to be quizzed ruthlessly every week and fail badly. So I hope you enjoy that element of the show. We've been doing these for the last couple weeks. We're going to continue doing them. We do them live on Twitch, so I've done my best to sort of trim down some of the extra banter, but if you would like to see the full episode, you can view that there. I'll put the link in the description below. And if you would like to participate in the homework assignments, yeah, there's homework on our Discord. All that information is also down below. Make sure you come check us out and hang out. It's a great community of folks. But I hope you enjoy these lessons. We'll keep these coming once a week, and I hope it helps you be better as a battler. Enjoy the episode. Cheers.
Yeah, so today's lesson's a little bit shorter, or maybe it should be, and then we'll wind up talking for a really long time anyway.
Yeah.
But it's also one that's a little uncomfy to put as a lesson, because I think this is, these two subject groups are extremely experience-based. I have them up early because there's some clear things that you can basically take from this on how to get this experience-based information, basically how to make each time you play the game a little bit more valuable to you. But that is kind of a qualifier to this lesson for everyone, is that the stuff within here is better almost synergized by actually playing the game a lot, getting those reps. And we'll see that as we get into it.
You're telling me that you can't just tell me some simple rule and I will forever always shield the right move every time?
No, but I do have some good guidelines.
Turns out it's not quite that simple, yeah?
Turns out that theory isn't everything, and you need a little bit of practice to go with it. Comfort with Pokemon. So this is a lesson that is unteachable. And I'm going to give my biggest example here at the bottom, but you can spend all your time on PvPoke, and you can spend all your love in making time, but you don't really learn how to be a very good battler just spending a ton of time looking at PvPoke, despite it being an amazing tool. Actually battling with them and learning them and playing matches with them is really important, and this is why I am the best Greedent player in the world in Great League, because I played an entire season of Aero Draft League with Greedent, and I would argue it's one of probably my two best Pokemon on that team, despite being my round 6 pick. There are 4 main things that I like to consider comfort with a Pokemon. 4 main knowledge points. Now, I said earlier that knowledge isn't everything, and it's not, because these 4 things have to mesh together. You have to know how much damage you take from a given attack, so I know how much Hydro Pump from a Azumarill will do to Greedent, just like I know how much a Cross Chop from a Champ will do to Greedent. You need to know how much damage you deal with attacks. This is another one that varies. I know how much a Crunch will do to a Sableye, and I also know how much a Crunch will do to a Deoxys defense, and a Body Slam will do to an Azumarill. You need to know how you use the Pokemon in battle. And this is going to vary for person to person, and for Pokemon to Pokemon. Not everyone uses Vigoroth as a safe swap. Sometimes you might want to lead it, and have another safe swap, and abuse something like a Vigoroth Sableye team. Generally, you want your own niche for a Pokemon because you're going to be more consistent playing it in that role. I almost always use Greedent to draw out a fighter, and to get a Bullet Seed energy advantage, because it is really good at taking a shield and leaving an opposing Pokemon in farm down range. That is essentially what I used Greedent for most all of ADL. Sometimes, if the opponent had a Ghost type and I was able to lock it on, it does very well there. But you want to know how you're generally using this Pokemon, and it's going to become a lot more comfortable for you at that point. And then how you navigate both energy and shields. This is actually my worst point with Greedent, because I am very greedy, and I will try to keep 2 Body Slams almost all the time before throwing a move, because I like coming out of a matchup with energy. If I can throw a Crunch and an opposing Pokemon that comes in, I love to, get that 30% chance. That's huge for flipping a matchup. Getting a body slam worth of damage on an next Pokemon is really big. And then how you navigate shields. I rarely, if ever, will shield Greedent. That's its role. It's a tank. It's a big, beefy Pokemon that can take a pummeling. And if I'm using Greedent on a team with Trevenant, I'm going to want to save shields for Trevenant. If I'm using it on a team with Toxicroak, I'm going to want to save shields for Toxicroak. Whatever that is, you generally get more bang for your buck with a shield if you don't use it on Greedent.
I mean, I was gonna fill in with only one thing, and it sort of helps to hammer home the point about playing is not the same as simming your matchups. The reason why you need to know how much damage you take, how much damage you do, and in as many scenarios as possible is that you are not always going to be in the scenarios that PV Poke sort of defaults to. And while you can always find those scenarios, it's not practical, for example, to sim out Greedent across multiple matchups and across multiple things. But knowing, for example, Machamp's Cross Chop does this to Greedent. I've eliminated their ghost, right? I've farmed their ghost. Machamp's coming in. I have like close to body slam. We CMP tie. I want to get this body slam off. It's really valuable, but do I need to shield? And knowing whether or not Greedent will survive that move to make that determination on using your energy is a massive advantage for you as a player. And there's no way to do that other than experience. So being able to trust that you know exactly how this matchup is going to play out, even beyond just, well, I safe swapped against Machamp. Yeah, you know how that plays out because that's an easy sim. But what happens after that safe swap? And what happens when you are at 33% of your health, essentially, and you need to know whether or not you can tank, a Ice Beam from an Azumarill? The only way you're going to know is practice.
So how do you learn comfort? Well, you play with a Pokemon. This is kind of what I've come back to. You try not to shield much early on, especially in a season like this where it's low risk. Knowing how much damage a Pokemon does to you, you don't learn it as much when you shield all the moves. You learn it from tanking, from taking those risks. You try to make a team that fits to it so that it can actually shine. If you're losing every game, it's going to be harder to actually learn a Pokemon. But if you comp something well, you can have a better chance, and you're at least making these games close. And you will lose a lot because you're going to shield no shield things that you should shield. But that tends to pay dividends later on. Yeah,
I liked, for example, on the last Great League rotation, Sandslash is here, and I jammed it on a team with some real meta players.
Yes.
We jammed it with Walrein and Trev.
Yep.
And while we won a lot of games, but what I really got to do was I got an opportunity to see where Sandslash could shine. An opportunity to see what it could do, because I wasn't... If the team needs every Pokemon to absolutely crush every single time, it's hard sometimes for that to happen. But if you have a really good core, going back to a previous lesson, and you can jam a new Pokemon you'd like to learn alongside of them, you can often learn a lot more because you're taking some of the pressure off of that Mon to perform.
How do you feel about another one?
Oh, no. Why you put this pressure on me? All right, fine.
I used some meta Pokemon.
Oh, no.
So, okay.
I'm going to be exposed.
I am absolutely ready for you to be exposed.
All right. So what is our quiz topic this time?
This is damage ratios. So this is about how much damage each of these moves will do. I give you a very generous range.
Okay.
And you get to see against these six. These are 6 Pokemon you should know decently well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm nervous though. I'm super nervous. Oh god.
Azumarill is against a Walrein. How much, in what range, does Play Rough hit Walrein, and in what range does Hydro Pump hit Walrein? Say that it was an Ice Beam Hydro Pump Azumarill.
Okay. So, if I remember, and I am assuming this is the more close to optimal IV spreads for both, yes? So we're talking more like an XL Azu, and because I actually think Play Rough is pretty close between a pair of those ranges. In so much as that an old school Azu with one with like say 9 or 10 attack would likely might push it out of a range. It's pretty close, I think. Like that's my gut instinct.
I'm going to give you a little bit of benefit of the doubt on this. So
I'm not actually
like
sure.
5% or so. Yeah, I know.
So I would my instinct is that a play rough does between 25 and 50% to a wall rain. It is below 50. It's not quite half, but it's certainly more than a quarter. That's the one where I feel like an old school Azu with more attack potentially gets above the 50% threshold. My gut is like, if I was putting an actual number, it does like 41%-ish. So in that 25 to 50 rate.
You are in the correct range, and you are very close on that 41%.
I'm like, I feel like I've eaten a lot of play roughs.
Yeah. But you are correct in that correct range.
I believe Hydro Pump is sub 25%. I think it's also very close. But I do believe if it's not just under, it's just above. But I would say that I believe that Hydro Pump is in like the low 20% damage.
Incorrect, actually. Hydro Pump goes to around 30%.
Oh, okay.
It is just a heavy damage move, even when resisted.
Then help.
Another Azumarill. We're using Azumarill. I'm using some steady goers. So Azu's the first 3, and then DD is the second 3.
Yeah. Okay.
What does Azumarill's Ice Beam do to a Galarian Stunfisk?
I believe that Ice Beam is in the 25 to 50% range. It's neutral because of the steel ground type, but it's non-stab coming out of there. I want to say, I feel like Bubble plus Ice Beam is close to 50% or around 50%, but I think the Ice Beam itself is a little bit less of that damage than you sort of account for. So I would guess that it's just under 50%. But I would not be surprised to find out it's just over 50%. So I'm saying under. I'm saying Ice Beam is like 44%.
So this one's actually on the cusp. An Ice Beam, if it's default against default, does just over 25%. If it's a max stat product Azu against a max stat product Stunfisk, it does 24%.
Wow.
But it is right on that marker. I'm going to give it to you for that 25 to 50% because it does veer into that range. This is one that both of those kind of fall in.
But I even had the math. I even thought it was higher than that. Like I thought it would have been closer on the cusp of that middle one. But I think I think my heuristic has always been bubbles plus, like, the bubbles you need to get to Ice Beam plus Ice Beam is close to half. But those bubbles, I think, are doing way more work than I would normally give them credit for.
Yeah, especially for a fast move.
Yeah. Hydro Pump, I believe, is in that upper echelon of 75 to 100. It is not a one-shot. You do not one-shot a Azu or a Stunfisk with Hydro Pump. But it's another one of those where it's very, very close if they do the full range of bubbles to it. And I do think it's well above that 75% threshold.
This one you're also wrong in the other direction. It is 50 to 75%. It is just about 70%.
All right. Oh boy.
This one I had the name correct. Awesome. So Azu uses the following moves against Trevenant. So Ice Beam. Say it's an Azumarill that has Ice Beam, and then B is an unfortunate. It's an Azumarill with Play Rough and Hydro Pump, and it faces a dastardly Trevenant on the other side, and has to throw the Play Rough attack. So how much? What ranges do you think each of these moves fall in? Well, this is a little bit glassier of a Pokemon.
Yeah, you survive them. I know that. I want to say Ice Beam is on the upper end of the 50 to 75 range, or potentially on the very low end of the 75 to 100 range. I know that you comfortably tank an Ice Beam, but you can, the scenario that I have experienced is if you tank an Ice Beam, they can like multi-shield and then bubble you down, which means that you're taking at least 3/4 of your health. I would say for a stat optimal Azu, Ice Beam probably does. Oh man, that is hard. I'm actually gonna go with about 80%. I'm gonna go in the highest echelon there.
You were incorrect with that
Damn
one.
it.
It is with a high stat product Azu, it's around 60%. If we're going with an old Azu, it's about 65%.
Okay.
For that. Again, against a good Trevenant.
Yeah.
A less good Trevenant, you push into like 66, 67. But that's, you know, the old like level 40, and then an XL, it actually is only like 60% or so.
So it's about 2/3 at most. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Still, again, enough to say comfortably can tank, but certainly less damage than I expect. I'm gonna go ahead and say Play Rough is very. I think it's very similar. Well, maybe not though. I haven't used Azu so much. I've just been sometimes tanking this. I think a Play Rough does just under 50%.
That one, you're right.
Yeah.
I should have waited. You doubted yourself, but no. You're right. It's around 45%. For a high rank Azu against a high rank Trevenant.
That's wild. Are you counting? Are you accounting for the Rock Smash damage though?
Oh, the Rock Smash damage is so considerable.
Yeah.
And speaking of same type attack bonus, our next one is a Deoxys defense form against a Medicham. This is a very fun matchup for both players. But how much do those moves do? Psycho Boost and Thunderbolt.
Oh my god. Again, I assume we're looking at an XL Medi, which is a massive pile of stat. Thunderbolt is a decent move, but non-stab. It's just neutral effectiveness, non-stab. Like, part of me feels like it's almost God, like I feel like it could be less than 25%, but this feels so crazy for a charge move, like a decent charge move, to do less than 25% of something, unless it's resisted. Like, it just feels like that's wild. But I think I'm gonna say less than 25%. I think I'm gonna put it in that bottom category. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a little higher, but I don't think it is. Thunderbolt
is just over 25%. It does 30% of the health of Medicham.
That doesn't surprise me, but I think, as per usual, like, you know, knowing that it's a third or slightly less than a third is really the heuristic there. I believe Psycho Boost, the first Psycho Boost, is also in that category. I believe it does less than half, but it does more than a quarter.
Yep. Yeah, Psycho Boost would also be in that second category. It does around 28% for a max stat product Medicham and a very good kind of raid IV Deoxys defense. So yes, both of these are in that second category, or in around a third of the damage range. We have an even worse matchup for Deoxys defense though, because it's against Sableye. Now I know you've played a lot of Sableye, so
I have.
Hopefully you know whether or not you can tank these moves.
Yes, the answer is you can tank them. The question is,
how well?
How well? And I know that both of these moves hover around the 50% mark. Like, they're not like, they're not like 49 and 51%, but I mean that they're like they're definitely in that middle range. I don't think either of these moves do greater than 75% to Sableye. And none of them do less than 25. They're unresisted. Sableye is not that bulky. My instinct on these, I feel like they're like really close to that number. My instinct on this would be that Rock Slide does slightly under 50%, and Thunderbolt does slightly over 50%. So that's kind of, I think, where I'd land. I would not be surprised to find out they're both slightly over 50, or they're both slightly under. But I want to say that, like, Rock Slide slightly under, Thunderbolt slightly over 50%.
Both are slightly under. Again, I'm thinking, especially with Thunderbolt, you're thinking about it with some counter damage in there.
That could very well be.
Because counter only singly resisted by Sableye. But yeah, Thunderbolt's doing against a very high bulk Sableye, around 40%.
Okay.
So it does, add up with those counters, and then Rock Slide's doing a little bit less, closer to like 35 to 30%.
Yeah. And I do think that is absolutely, for me, a lot of what I think about is like, what happens if, you're fighting this matchup from straight, and it's that counter damage adding up that I don't always account for. I'm very much a battler that thinks to myself, about how much can I take here, and some of that is purely just practice and not based in any kind of math.
Well, it's also, and like, this is a good part to share with this, is you want to shield the Sableye sometimes just because the health is that valuable.
Right.
And despite the fact that you can cleanly farm down a Deoxys, like, these moves add up. So...
yeah, and you want to be in a position to actually utilize any of that extra energy that you generated.
Okay, one more, and then you are free.
Oh, dear God.
So our DD is finally against an Azumarill, a matchup it actually wants to see. Because it is lugging that powerful Thunderbolt attack. Now, again, Thunderbolt non-stab from a very bulky Pokemon.
And it's also
against
a
very bulky Pokemon.
Oh, no. I feel comfortable that it used to be above 50% in the old ways. But I feel like every time my Azumarill, like when I use the XL, it gets hit by a move, I'm shocked at how little damage the move does. Like, every single time. I would guess that a Thunderbolt... the Thunderbolt do more than half to Azumarill. No. I'm gonna take a guess that I think potentially both of these moves are in the 25 to 50 range, although I would not be surprised if Psycho Boost is actually slightly under 25%. That's where I'm gonna go on the big boy XL Azu, but I might be overestimating it slightly here.
No, so Thunderbolt does around 36%.
God.
So you are absolutely correct. Azumarill is a monster of bulk. That 2.4 mil stat product is ridiculous and kind of obscene. And Deoxys, obviously non-stab bulky, throwing that Thunderbolt only does just over a third to Azumarill.
Jesus.
And then Psycho Boost is under that 25%. It does
Crazy.
about 1/5. It does about 20% to a max.
Yeah.
Max bulk Azu from a bulky Deoxys defense.
Oh, at least I got that one right. And
yeah,
no, the XLs have been out for more than they've been out a long time. Like a really long time.
I want to say, like, before we close up this, I do commend you on how you did. This is something that I wouldn't want to have to walk through a quiz of. It's really difficult to give quantitatively. I know that you're very similar to me, where you tend to battle by feel, and you have these matchups that you play out a lot, but based on where you're at in the matchup. Right. You don't necessarily memorize this does within these 4 buckets of damage. It's a lot easier to say in a matchup, can I tank X from here? Rather than looking at it and saying, oh, I'm at 70% HP. I can probably tank a play rough, on my Metacham or whatever it may be.
And that's where practice is really the number one way for you to do it. I would say that, like, if you put me in game situations and you told me, here's your Obstagoon and here's the move that's coming at it, you don't shield, what's your health bar look like? I bet you I could get real close. Because for me, I'm not quantifying those by numbers, but I know, for example, like, if I can see literally any clear behind my health bar, I probably don't survive a play rough.
This rolls perfectly into the next subject, which is, again, something that PvPoke can't necessarily teach you in the game scenarios. So shield usage. Shields do two things. Commonly, you only know of one thing that shields do. They reduce incoming damage from a charge attack. Cool. That's great. They also make your opponent play very differently. This is my favorite aspect of shields, and in my opinion, very underrated. If we go to the next slide, we'll see three main things as to why you might think that having shields help. Opposing debuffers, and opposing baiters. Those first two are different. You should say them with a different intonation. Opposing debuffers and opposing debuffers. We see our birds here on the left side. Skarmory and Talonflame have one move in common. Can you remind me what it is, Ken?
I believe it is a bird of the brave variety.
Bird of the brave variety. Now, if you are a Skarmory or a Talonflame going up against a Pokemon, and they have no shields, are you going to hesitate to use that brave bird?
Probably not. It depends on
the
matchup, but generally speaking, with both Mons, the only real factor about whether or not you want to fire the Brave Bird is whether or not you think it will land.
Exactly. And if your opposing trainer has a shield still, it might be that you go for the other charge move, and they might benefit because of that, because Brave Bird hits very hard. And if they throw a Sky Attack or a Flame Charge, they might be able to come out with advantage for it. The Pokemon at the bottom, a Jellicent and a Galvantula, two of our debuffers that debuff the opposing Pokemon. Now, if you are an Azumarill against a Jellicent in the back, and you have a shield, and they need 2 Shadow Balls to knock you out, there's a chance that they might try to get that shield with a Bubble Beam and potentially waste energy in the process. Galvantula is the same way. A Galvantula against a Skarmory, if the Skarmory has no shields, it's going straight discharge. But if the Skarmory has a shield, it might throw out a lunge, which is very bad for it. And if you choose not to shield that, you can benefit greatly from that failed bait. And then on the right side here, we see 2 Pokemon that are commonly seen. We've seen them a lot in this presentation. These Pokemon, they don't debuff. They don't have a debilitating nuke move, like Brave Bird, but they do have different energy cost moves. We have Azumarill that might have both Ice Beam and Hydro Pump, and we have a Stunfisk, which is almost always with Rock Slide and Earthquake. Now, if I'm, say, a Vigoroth against both of these Pokemon, if I have a shield in play, that Azumarill might hesitate to throw the Hydro Pump, and I might be able to get an extra Body Slam or 2 in that match because they throw an Ice Beam, which does notably less damage. And same for the Galarian Stunfisk. If I don't shield, they might throw a Rock Slide, and then I still have that shield for an Earthquake. Again, these are how having a shield actually does affect how your opponent plays. But how do you use these shields? That's going to be the next couple slides. So, this is not a quiz for you. You don't have to worry. And this also is not a question that has a correct answer. However, as always, with high-level play, with matchups analysis like this, there's trends that tend to be better. You have a shield with Azumarill, you are facing a Galarian Stunfisk, they have an undisclosed Pokemon in the back. This information is incomplete because knowing what their lead is, or knowing what their third Pokemon that's already fainted, does help you a lot because you can make inferences on their team. But calling opposing lines of 3 is a later lesson, so I didn't want to dive too deep into it today. But this is generally a scenario that's fairly common. They have a Pokemon that you can farm down with your back Pokemon. You have a shield. You have energy. Do you protect the energy and protect the health of your back Pokemon? Or do you save the shield for that back Pokemon? If it's something like Trevenant against something like Galarian Stunfisk, I would say you do not shield in this scenario. I would probably never shield in this scenario as the Azumarill player. It could backfire greatly. You know, they could have something that's soft to Azumarill, say it's a Scrafty in the back, and you could still, you know, shield a potential earthquake and farm down the G-Fisk and get to a play rough, whereas this crafty is going to do very well against that Trevenant. But in general, I would say you no shield in this scenario. If we want to go to the next one. This is a Vigoroth with an Obstagoon in the back, going for the traditional triple counter team. Say there was a Deoxys in the lead. Against an Alolan Ninetale with an undisclosed Pokemon in the back. In this scenario, I say you shield, because if they have a Charmer, there's a potential always of a second Charmer. And your best bet here, your out, so to speak, is that they have something like a Shadow Grand Bull in the back, and you get to a Body Slam that takes out a good chunk of health, and Obstagoon can close it. I think this is a guaranteed shield, especially because Vigoroth has that much energy. But this would be a different scenario that would actually cause you to shield. This one is really tough to learn and is really dependent on the previous stuff. We will be exploring it more in later lessons because of how it interplays with creating a line of 3 and facing an opposing line of 3.
Right. There are factors here that without knowing them make it very hard to do. Like, for example, also, like, if this Ninetales is on Powder Snow, for example, that's a scenario where I'm much more comfortable attempting to shield and then farm it down from there. Whereas if it's on Charm, this is a scenario where you may not actually even successfully do that and come out with energy, or not with a ton. You will get to use a Body Slam here to finish this matchup off anyway. But it's such a more appealing scenario to come out with like almost 3 Body Slams. That's going to make the last matchup extremely difficult for them, regardless of what that Pokemon is. But these are obviously, you know, in some ways these are your own team, knowledge of your own team in Pokemon, and then knowledge of and read of what your opponent or what the metagame looks like, to know, for example, is Obstagoon going to be able to take advantage of this against the lion's share of the meta, or do I really need Vigoroth to put in enough chip damage that Obstagoon will be able to win a neutral to neutral negative matchup because of, you know, the fact that I've done 2 Body Slams to the Backmon.
Yeah, and especially, like, there's another factor that these two have in common, or that are distinct about these two, is Trevenant tends to win a lot of matchups if it has an advantage. So Trevenant can farm down the G-Fisk. Obstagoon's a lot more RPS in its matchups because it has a double weakness to counter. It doesn't have anything to do against a fairy type. So letting this Vigoroth go and then farming down the Alolan Ninetales is likely to wind up just still in a extremely poor position more frequently than it would be for Trevenant. If there's anything else you have to say, we have homework from here. It's actually again a relatively short lesson, but a lot of homework because it's a lot of self-learning.
Right. Yeah, and this is one of those things that you kind of nailed it, which is that it's not as simple as, you know, shielding, you know, it's not, you can't just say always shield this, never shield this. I think the biggest thing to understand is the situational advantages around shielding and how they apply to certain Pokemon. And you can categorize them in a few different ways. One of them is the Trevenant way, or the Vigoroth way, which I like to call the running start. A Pokemon that with advantage, shields or not, tends to be an overperformer. Those Pokemon are even better with shields. And so when you look at sort of powerful generalists who have really strong nukes with shields down, those Pokemon tend to favor lines where you are not worried about parity. There's also sort of the fast move pressure mon, where if your backmon here was something like a Charmer of your own, having that shield allows you the ability to simply charm through the remaining Pokemon on the other side. And then there's Pokemon, Obstagoon falls in this category. Obstagoon is sort of a consistent damage dealer, right? It just sort of does its damage quickly. It's bulky enough, but it's not like, I like to point out its matchup with Registeel as a good example. It should be favored in that matchup. But the simple answer is that because you have to respect a Focus Blast, you're favored in that matchup when a lot of shields are in play, when you're playing kind of fair. And Obstagoon has a ton of matchups where, like, you're going to just sort of keep
not
pace.
Fast enough.
And you want advantage against the field at large. And a shield makes you favored in some matchups. Or keeping shield parity is important for those matchups so that you can actually find a way to win. So you just sort of have to understand how your Pokemon fit together and what they do. Combine that with a read of what you think is likely your opponent may have. And you're going to be right sometimes, and you're going to be wrong sometimes. And the most powerful Pokemon in a lot of formats, the two that come to mind specifically right here, I'll actually include Trevenant in that as well because we've seen it, are Talonflame and Sableye. Pokemon that under every single one of these scenarios, you would keep that shield and try and farm down their Mon for advantage because you will simply win.
I'm going to add a third in limited formats is almost the flagship for this at this point is that Frostlass.
I was about to say, like, I think I'm about to say Frostlass too. Those are Pokemon that have extremely potent. Walrein actually kind of falls in this category too to an extent. Has really good coverage profile, can frequently just out damage anything, and it's very hard to blanket. And so when you run into scenarios where a Pokemon is like, well, with a shield, I'm going to be able to pile damage onto you, that's when this scenario becomes the ideal. And yes, are you going to lose sometimes making that determination? Yeah, but more often than not, knowing how your team works is going to put you in the best position to win. And GBL, I hate to say it, is not necessarily about finding the win condition 100% of the time. It's about always finding the play pattern that puts you in the greatest chance of winning. There's always a chance in blind that you simply cannot win the game.
It's a numbers game. If this decision gives you a win 80% of the time, and a different one could win you this game, but wins you 50% of the time, you want to go for the higher percentage overall move, because GBL is a game of 5,000 games, so to speak.
And we argue this on stream a lot. We'll talk about this where people are like, oh well, if you had done this in this matchup, and I'm like, you are correct. If in this game I had done this thing, you're 100% correct that I think I would have, the outcome could have been slightly different. However, I've been doing that thing with 80% success over the last week, and deviating from it frequently is the easiest way of getting tilted. Because what ends up happening is when you deviate from your pattern and your opponent does the thing that you were expecting them to do with your originally developed pattern, then suddenly you become tilted because you're like, gee, now I can't, now no matter what I do, it's always the wrong thing. And it's just a really easy way to get in your own head. I genuinely recommend when you're learning Pokemon and you're learning patterns and matchups, just don't deviate. Don't deviate from that pattern, especially in lead matchups. If you're like, look, my team's play pattern is, if my matchup isn't great with Talonflame in the lead, say I'm leading it, I'm going to Brave Bird, and then I'm switching. And it doesn't matter what happens. That's always the play pattern. If you lose a ton of games doing that, reevaluate the play pattern. If you lose some games doing that, the play pattern is good. GBL is just sometimes harsh.
And effectively, like, going back to the first topic that we went over in this meeting, once you're comfortable in that, then you can start practicing other things. Again, with the understanding that you're going to lose a good bit, trying it out. I've played my fair share of games where I lead Greedent. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's really meta dependent, and it's really opponent dependent in Show 6. But you have to try it to kind of learn how to play that, and you might wind up just going back to your original one, and that's also fine. If you want to, we can go on to the homework now.
Let's take a look at homework. I know everybody's fiending for homework.
So again, these are the 4 damage ranges that we went over earlier in the stream. These are 6 different Pokemon. It's okay to get these wrong. You saw how Ken handled them. These are all in the Great League. So this is each of these Pokemon one way versus the other Pokemon, and then the other way back against the first Pokemon. Gives you, what is that? 11 different matchups. I wasn't gonna bother with Bulldoze against
Right.
Swampert because you never throw it.
Don't throw
And
Bulldoze at Swampert, y'all.
yeah, and it can give you, an idea of where are these moves landing. If these are Pokemon you've used a lot, this might be a little bit easier. If they're ones you're less familiar with, I know not everyone has a Great League Drifblim, for instance. It might give you a good jumping off point on things that you can practice with, which will be one of the extra credits. If we want to go to the next bit of homework, these are just 2 scenarios of do you shield or not, and why. You are the trainer on the left for both of these, and again at the bottom there is information missing here, so you're not exactly given all the information. I want to know more why you are shielding or not with this. It doesn't matter which answer you say. There's arguments in both directions for each of these. I want to know why you are doing this or why you are not doing this. I did not list the energy for Talonflame. I will add that after the stream. I just noticed that one of them is missing an energy total. That is information that's important to consider, but for most of the viewers, if you don't religiously count fast moves, you might not readily be able to gauge your opponent's energy, and that will also be a later lesson, but I've added it here. And then there are 2 bits of extra credit, if you want to go to the next one. So this one I found rather fun. How do you shield in a way that loses you these games? And why? How does that play out? How do you screw up your current position in both of these games? I want to know exactly what your opponent does. Do they bait you? Do they throw a move that you shouldn't shield, that you should let go? And you do shield it, even if it isn't a bait? And how do you cause yourself to lose from this scenario for each of these situations? The right one's particularly interesting. I quite like it. And then there is a second extra credit.
Okay.
This is find 2 Pokemon you want to become comfortable with and report the things that you've learned by next week with those Pokemon. I believe our next rotation does include Halloween Cup, so that could be a good platform for the Great League if that's where you'd like to practice. But it can also be a Pokemon in, I believe we have Master League with Halloween Cup. Any format. If you're playing the Nemesis Cup in Sylph, and you want to practice a Pokemon a little bit more in some practice tournaments there, I just want to know what you're trying out and what you're learning to show that you are intentional about these things.